Hey, what's up everyone? So in this video, I'm going to show you how we consistently land data engineering roles at top tech companies, specifically how we pass those interviews. The video is under 15 minutes long. If you watch it all the way through, we will cover topics like the truth behind mass applying tactics. This is where you could use AI to mass apply with your resume, or mass application services where people overseas will apply for you, and we'll get into if that actually works. You will also see a mid-level data engineering resume that got 6 interviews, so it'll be a full resume. You can look through it, copy the format, whatever you want. And finally, the 3 strategies to pass data engineering interviews. So let's get into it. Oh, before we start, my name is Aman Varachia. I've been a data engineer for just over 7 years. I've worked at 3 Fortune 100 companies, and I'm still an active senior data engineer in big tech. And if you're still wondering why should you listen to this guy, it's because I have cracked most of the data engineering interviews at top tech companies, and I still prep and interview because, again, I'm under 30 years old, so I'm still in the game. Let's get into it. All right, so really quickly, just so you know that the tips I'm about to give you actually work, here are some of my students who have landed roles. In total, I've had just over 30 students land a role. So let's take a look at some of them. So 70% of our students land a new or higher paying role in under 5 months. And most of these were experienced data engineers when they started. Okay. So we have Mo over here. He had graduated from a graduate program. He got into Meta. We have Tian. Tian came from a FANG already, and he broke into Airbnb. Jerry came from a Fortune 500 company, and he got into BNSF. Sneha got into Amazon. Anthony broke into a data focused team as a software engineer. So he was a software engineer and he pretty much upskilled in data engineering, and he managed to land a role right here at the bottom. Amir was a new grad and he broke into a cloud data type of role, and broke 100K as a new grad just with an undergraduate degree. And then over here, this is a slightly different type of use case. So Ahmed was a student that started off as an electrical engineer, right? So he had no prior data engineering experience. We worked one-on-one, but the reason I added this one here is just to show you that I do also cover a lot of the very fundamental basics. If you're missing any of that, it can work because Ahmed already went through the program and he started landing interviews. He has not landed a job yet, but he only started a few months ago. And then we have Nathan, broke 170K base, landing a role, and he only worked with me for about 2 months and he broke 170K in base salary. So these are just some of the students that have had some success. And yeah, let's keep going. So before we go into the actual tips that can help you land a better role, we first need to break down just some of the actual issues that data engineers face, right? So why data engineers can't switch companies, or why so little of data engineers break 200,000 in total comp. And if you're asking, what do I, have an experience to be able to talk on the subject? I became a senior data engineer with only 2 years of experience, right? So with only 2 years graduating college, I was already over 150K in salary. So I do have a lot of experience pretty early on in my career hitting most of these numbers, right? So reality number one, right? On average, good data engineers only get 3 to 5 interviews per cycle. Okay, that's just the truth in 2026. The job market with everything, even if you have a really great resume, this is just the average amount of interviews someone gets per cycle, meaning we need to lock in, right? So this is one of the biggest problems, okay? And again, if you're thinking that you might never be able to, obtain 170, 180, whatever K salary, just realize that the median right now is 157,000. So if you're already listening to this video, you probably have some drive, some initiative, right? Which most of the average, right, in any population, the median, the average, are not that driven. So think about it. If you put a little bit of time, you can easily break the median, right? Because you're above average if you're watching this. So if you're thinking about, okay, if the issue is 3 to 5 interviews per cycle, then can't I just use like a mass application service? And so getting back to the issue, right? So you might be thinking, Amon, if you can only get 3 to 5 interviews per cycle, then why don't I just try and mass apply to, get more interviews? And you might be thinking, let me use AI or a done for you application service, right? Where, you pay some service and they use people overseas to apply on your behalf and send 30 to 50 applications a week or something. And the truth is, I've tried it, it does not work. Here's the reality, okay? If you use an AI tool, it can only, automatically apply to those companies that have, pretty bad websites, right? Because there's authentication, there's usually that capture button that stops a robot, right? So AI will not be able to apply to all of the good data engineering roles. And then if you think about the mass application, someone overseas will have to log into your Google account. Okay, there's VPN issues. They'll have to log in, they'll have to manually apply, and usually they are not able to do that from overseas and get into your account. So if you use a mass application service, they will be applying to all of the lower wage roles, really bad companies, the small startups. They're not opportunities that you actually would want to land. And again, I tried it, you can try yourself. I'm just telling you the truth of, trying to bypass the system. It doesn't really work, okay? And the truth is, there's only about 20 new good postings a week that come out. If you really look at LinkedIn and you look at the good companies, right? Fortune 500s, good startups, FANGs, there's only about 20 good roles that come, a week. So if you finish your interview prep fast, you can then just use the remaining of your time to, maybe browse 1 or 2 coding questions a week. And then you can pretty much apply to all the roles yourself in under an hour a day. And so if you're wondering what is the actual physical solution that you can do for this problem, which we're going to get into, okay, overall, it's just positioning, okay, building a personal brand, and then skill gap filling. And I'm going to show you guys exactly how to do that. And so if we're taking a look at the second big reason why data engineers, can't just switch companies easily or land better paying roles, the reality is that they just don't pass interviews, okay? So from the few interviews that data engineers get, about 80% fail just the first round, and it's probably higher at different companies, okay? And what this does is if you fail the interview, it creates a company cooldown period. This is where a company will not allow you to reapply for a certain amount of months because you've just interviewed. And more companies are starting to implement this because of the amount of volume of applications coming in. It used to be just Meta and the big, Google, Amazon, those companies, but now they just close down your ability to apply for more months. And this, breaks your confidence. And also there's an opportunity cost with every week that you're not in the role that you actually want. And so you might be thinking, can't I just self-study? Like if the issue is passing the interview, I can just spend more time and study. The truth is you can do that. And I did that a few years back when the job market was a lot easier. Okay. This is during the 2020 times. And I pretty much just studied a little bit more than everyone else. And I got into the big tech roles. But right now in 2026, if you try and study by yourself, it's going to take 2 to 4 times longer, just because the amount of content you need now to pass, because the bar went higher, okay, the amount of content and the amount of depth you need has just become so much larger that it takes more time to cover all of those topics. And again, if you look at opportunity cost, let's say you would have landed a job that paid, $10, $20, or $30,000 more. If you break it down, that's about $500 extra a week for every week that you haven't landed that role. And that's not even talking about the knowledge gaps that you might have if you self-study. I'll give you an example. A student had a Microsoft phone screen call and they asked him a question about clustered indexes. Now, clustered indexes, is pretty common, but if you self-studied, you might have missed that. And so you might have just missed your phone screening right off the bat. That's the issue with self-studying. And again, I know this because that's what happened to me a long time ago. I failed so many interviews because there was just 1 or 2 topics that I missed. And so the way that I get a student prep within 9 to 12 weeks is I use their first 6 weeks to solely preparing for the interview. And this includes, getting on live calls, going through all the trainings. And then after week 6, this is where I will tell them to allocate about 50% of their time to applying and the other 50% to continuing their prep. And then by week 12, you can focus about 80% of your time just going online and applying every day. And you just have 20% more to finish of your prep. And so this way you pretty much condense your prep timeline from months to weeks. Now you have less anxiety about prepping, and all you can focus on is just going online and applying. So let's take a look at the first action item that you need to do to fight against these two issues. So there are 3 areas that I focus on to help a student land a role. This is area number 1, which is you need to get noticed. And right there is a resume that actually landed a student a role a couple of weeks ago. Okay, I built that for her myself. So good resumes win no matter the job market, right? We see it daily. The market doesn't reward what you know, it rewards what it can find, meaning your resume structure matters. That ATS tracker is real. The keywords, the projects you have, the gap fills in your skill need to be there, okay? So you need to fill your gaps. For example, if you're a staff engineer and you might be applying for a role that needs to do something along the lines of architecture and orchestration, and managing multiple applications, then you need Kubernetes. Okay, if it's more of an AI facing role, you need AI on there. And if you don't have it from your previous your actual job experience, then you need to build projects for it. But they can't just be basic level projects. They need to have high impact and tied to the actual current market conditions. Okay, and then that gets back to building out a good portfolio. Now again, because the bottleneck is the actual interview, you don't want to spend months and weeks actually building all of these projects, right? You want to do them really fast. Maybe within 1 week, you build your 2 projects that you need, and that's about it. And the last part is that you need to reframe everything. You need to show ownership if there was ownership, show depth if there was depth, and show impact if you made an impact. The reason is because you only have this little sheet of paper to get the recruiter to notice you, okay? And so this is what I pretty much did with a student, right? We prescribed her some projects. She went ahead and built those projects out. We restructured a lot of the wording in her resume. And again, we need to keep it ethical, keep it consistent, what actually happened, what the student actually did, and then try to find high points of impact and then just restructure the resume. Again, you need to get noticed. So this is step number 1. Now getting into area number 2, you have to pass your interviews. I love this area. Don't ask me why I love, interviewing and prepping and all those things. I just always loved it. I was really good at school. But if you've seen every scenario, every pattern or permutation, how could you fail? Okay. So on the left here, I just have some of the most common types of Python and SQL, problems and patterns that we see. And the thing about this is when you're prepping for your technical interviews, every problem that you do is not random. It all fits into some form of category, okay? Even your lead code problems, which don't really work well for data engineering, but each of those lead code problems fit into a software engineering category that is based on a pattern. So that's how you should be thinking, and that's how you're going to actually remember all these coding problems. You're going to actually see the pattern for a lot of the data engineering specific coding problems, and then you won't blank on the interview itself, right? So as far as technicals go, you need to know data engineering specific coding. That obviously covers, lists, dictionaries, tuples, sets, and a bunch of other, very basic data structures. But then again, on top of using those data structures, you need to be able to quickly identify what pattern to use. Sometimes you might be working with actual data, turning it into data frames and things like that. So that's just the coding aspect. And again, it's very important. 80% of students can't even pass these rounds. Then there's the DE domain knowledge. And this is where I mentioned that if you self-study, make sure you don't have any gaps in your DE domain knowledge, okay? If you're studying, things about data warehousing, make sure you cover every single aspect of data warehousing, because they can easily ask that as a question on an interview and you verbally might not know how to respond. Okay, so it's very, very important. And the domain knowledge and the theory carries over to when they ask you about your actual experience. Because if you're talking about a pipeline that you worked with at your own company and they ask you, name 3 ways you could optimize it, if you don't know the domain and the theory, you won't be able to pass that interview. Okay. And then you have the system design scenarios. These are just like hypotheticals, design the front end for gaming, dating, location, ride, food, restaurants, different types of apps, right? Develop the analytics layer, develop the data warehousing layer. Oh, what would happen if we switched it from, we have streaming data coming in. or what happens if we have, betting data and we need to quickly be able to read and write from some form of, storage. Oh, we need to use Redis. Oh, we need to use Cassandra to store the data. So there's a bunch of different areas, but what I would recommend for you if you're studying is to break them all up into their own components and then go deep within each one of them so that you cover all of your ground. Okay. And then now you are technically at that SME level. And this, if you prep really well, it's going to carry over for multiple years. You're going to be able to remember most of this stuff, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, and you can always come back and interview again once you refresh on your notes. So the third area that's very important is your ability to talk through your experience in a framework. At some companies, like most of the Fortune 500s, you might not even have to go into, a lot of system design scenarios. They might just make 2 interviews just over your experience and asking you to talk in depth about what you've built. Okay. So for this, you need to ethically enhance it via depth, knowledge, and storytelling. That's where the domain knowledge comes in. If you understand optimization, scale, how, compute works, all of these things, talking about your past experience will be a breeze. Okay. You just have to pretty much relate to different scenarios that have happened at work. And then you can throw in some enhancements that you used, talk about the tables, talk about optimizations. It becomes a lot easier. And this is super important because right here, okay, this is what I call a non-technical Chad. At every company, there's always a few people, right, that talk really well and they know a little bit of something, but they don't really get much done. Okay, they're not good engineers, but they can talk. They just have everything in order in their mind when they're communicating, and they tend to land the roles over the very technical students, and they usually get promoted to, senior, lead, director because of their communication skills. And so this is an area that you definitely can improve on by taking a step back, right, and creating a framework of what you've built, right, having everything ready so that it's pretty much like a sales script, okay, especially if you struggle under pressure. Okay. And for me, from my experience, pretty much all of my students who come through, okay, have this issue, especially on the senior and staff level. They're super, talented. They know so much about data engineering, but they just don't know how to keep the story straight. And so then that's where we spend more time being able to coach them on how to get through, the communication interviews. And so the truth is, if you can commit yourself to doing a really good interview prep, then you only need a few weeks of focus, right? Just actual focus. You can easily land a new role and add $20,000 to $60,000 in salary, probably even more. These are just average numbers. You can start fresh at a new company and you can reposition your career trajectory, right? If you want to get into the AI side, you can just switch roles to a more AI focused data engineering role, and that changes your trajectory. If you want to get into robotics, same thing. If you believe in space travel, join SpaceX. It all comes down to your ability to focus for a few weeks and really put in the work to study. And here's just a snapshot from levels.fyi showing some recent salaries that people have landed. And as you see right here, these are normal people, right? 3 years of experience, 5, 3, 2. And a quote that I use for myself or my own motivation, right, is that everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. These are just ordinary people that are landing good roles. There's more. There are way higher paying roles. So again, if you believe in yourself, it's possible. And so if you are interested in landing a top data engineering role and you want my help to be able to consistently pass your data engineering interviews, then fill out the form below. And if it's a fit, we can have a quick 15-minute chat together. Thanks.